know when you're new to labs, it can be a little overwhelming figuring out what to do with the data you've collected. So in this video, I'm going to show you some of the basic types of calculations that you might do to analyze the data that you collected in the lab. The type of calculation we're going to do is mostly going to depend on the type of data that we collected. Now, this will most likely be either measurements over time or a direct comparison of one or two variables. Let's start with measurements collected over time. In this case, we have a measurement at the start of the experiment, which we'll call time zero, and then one or more measurements after defined periods of time. With these data, the thing that we're looking for is how much did our measurements change from what they were at the beginning. To do this, we're just going to subtract the time zero measurement for that condition from each of the later measurements. So the control time zero gets subtracted from each control measurement at each time point. And the variable time zero gets subtracted from each of the variable measurements. Now, even though we have multiple data points here, note that we can't do a mean or other type of average calculation because we only have one measurement of each condition at each time. Now, it's definitely a good idea to have all of the data here in the table, but when we come to making the graph, we're only going to use the analyzed portion of the data. So in this case, that would mean just the change data, not each of the original measurements. So let's consider the next level of this, having multiple replicates for each condition at each time point. First of all, we'll need to calculate the change from the beginning, just like we did before. Then, we're going to calculate the mean and standard deviation at each time point. When we put this type of data on a graph, we'd mostly be focused on the mean change at each time. The standard deviation would then be put on as error bars to illustrate how spread out the original data was, without having to put every measurement on the graph. The final type of measurement we're going to look at is directly comparing one condition to another. This could be the effect of an independent variable compared to a control. When collecting this type of data, sometimes we get each measurement in a random order. And so the first thing we'll want to do is sort our data so that we have each condition grouped together. Now that we have our data organized into groups, we can go ahead with our mean and standard deviation calculations. Again, when we put this on a graph, rather than using all of the data that we collected, we would just want to use the mean and the standard deviation so that we would get a clearer comparison of the effect of our variable compared to the control. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you a starting point when it comes to how to analyze your data. Make sure you check out the other data analysis videos on choosing the type of graph to use and how to put the graph together.